Hey everyone, Tactics here, and in this video I'll be going over all 10 bosses in the new Sanctum of Domination raid on both normal and heroic difficulties from a tank's perspective, giving my fellow tank players some tips and tricks on how to handle all of these bosses. This isn't going to be an overall strategy guide, instead I'm going to focus specifically on what tanks have to deal with on every boss, and discuss some things that you can do to help your raid get that kill. In the future, I'll probably put out a video discussing how this changes for Mythic difficulty, so be sure to subscribe to the channel to be notified when I post that or any other tank-related content. With that said, let's jump into the first boss, the Tarragrue, and I'm going to be doing this on raidplan.io. If you guys don't know about that, great site, really helpful for doing plans or showing stuff like I'm going to be doing here, so definitely recommend it. But the Tarragrue, it's a one-stack taunt fight. Here, it's a big physical hit and a stun. If you have the stun immunity power, that can be a little bit useful. Also for the soaks, the very good thing to put on your tank. But overall, this is a pretty easy fight. There's really not much to talk about here from a tank's perspective. On heroic, you have the soaks, and I would definitely recommend having your tanks just soak all of the orange or purple soaks. They're very low impact for tanks to deal with, and if you have one of the debuff cleansing powers, you can slowly just get rid of those stacks over the course of the fight as well. What we did is we just had one tank eat all of the dot soaks and one tank eat all of the magic damage soaks, just so you weren't double dipping. And that was pretty much how we dealt with it. Never deal with the physical soaks, because that's something that can maybe get you killed by the Tarragrue. Just have anyone else in the raid that's not a tank soak those. But aside from that, there's really not much to this fight. At 10%, just be sure you're both ready to split up. Right, you have the two tanks here, 10%. One of you can go like up here with the boss, the other one's down here, and you just ping pong the boss kind of back and forth with taunts. And you can kite a little bit more if you need, but yeah, you're pretty much just bouncing this boss back and forth with taunts, and that's pretty much that whole Tarragrue fight there. Really not much to talk about. The Jailer next. It's another one stack taunt fight. The tank buster here, though, I would recommend using a DR against it. It's a physical hit, and it will pulsate shadow damage to the raid based on how much damage you took. So again, make sure you're trying to mitigate that just to reduce tank damage. But honestly, or raid damage, sorry. But honestly, like the raid damage is relatively low in general from that ability anyways. On heroic, when the abductors come down, just make sure one of your tank picks it up and just kind of bring it beside the boss so it can just be passively cleaved down. Just keep it close. Again, you want to maximize cleave damage for your raid, so just have those guys as close to the boss as possible. If you're having trouble with it, it does have a stacking bleed. It wasn't terribly scary for us. We just kind of kept it next to the boss, and then when it died, it died. But if you're having trouble, you can tank swap at higher stacks of the bleed. Specifically, if you have one going into the intermission phase, you might want to swap if you need to. But in general, it usually dies fast enough for this not to be an issue. For the actual eyeballs, let's use the tiny ones. Yeah, I'd say it's these two. I'm not actually sure. You'll want to probably tank them down towards this way if you can. The big thing here is where you're going to drop the puddles, right? You want to fill up, or you want to kind of leave about this area here safe, right? This area here is what you want to leave without puddles, which gives you a ton of platform where you can drop puddles, right? You're fine to drop puddles in all this area here, and tanking it in this area down here lets you stack all your ranged DPS in the middle here, and they can multi-dot. Destro can cleave them here, Havoc, right? So this lets them kind of split damage on both and get extra damage here if they're able to hit both, right? Obviously, if you start running out of puddles, you're having some bad puddles, you may need to move the boss slightly away up here, right? That does happen, but the number one thing is making sure that this area here is clear of puddles so that you're able to, one, run around with the boss when the eye beam comes out and still use those chains without getting hit by those puddles, and just in general you have enough space here. You can also put some puddles back here. There is some spots you can put puddles back here, but in general you just want to make sure you have enough space for your raid during the non-intermission phases. This does have to be 30 yards apart, so just keep that in mind. You can't bring them like super close like this. There you go. Like this is too close. You need to keep them at least 30 yards apart, but ideally just in range for both all your range DPS to be able to hit both if possible. Let's delete all these pictures here. Moving on to the next boss fight, the 9. Two random angels. I don't know which one is which. Let's say it's those two. Alright, so this is a 3-stack taunt fight. It's Kira, which is one of these two, and then Skyja, which is the one that comes down after the fact. Both those debuffs you can just taunt at 3 stacks. They're both physical. The Skyja one is a slight healing reduction, so just be aware of that. But in general, 3-stack taunt no matter what on this fight. You do want to keep these two bosses as stacked as possible. Again, we're maximizing cleave damage here. We want our raid to do as much damage as possible, and to do that, we want to keep these bosses together. There's a little ad that spawns like somewhere on a random player, so you can have that get gripped in. If you have any kind of DK, you can just insta grip that in. Otherwise, you can you might be able to knock it in. You can kick it and taunt it in though, and you want to just make sure that ad gets kicked, and it just gets again cleaved down with these two bosses. It's not super high priority. It's just going to get cleaved down. In terms of the actual boss abilities, I think the main one tanks can really help with is Falling Strike, which is those 4 purple soaks that spawn in the room. Depending on where you're standing, let's just put a bunch of diamonds out there, right? Let's say it's like this, and this for Falling Strike. If you pull these guys just over here, have one of the tanks sit in this, that really helps. It's not like the hugest thing, but it's something that's really helpful because tanks just are very it's very low impact for tanks to soak this, right? And then especially in the 3rd phase, right, when you're only dealing with like 1 angel, your tank can drag to here, and the tank not tanking can go get one of these far ones, right, if needed. So it's very helpful for tanks to soak that, because that can be a little bit dangerous for some of the specs in the game. And just for a tank, it's basically trivial to soak that, and it's not a big deal. Losing a bit of uptime on the boss is also less of a big deal for a tank versus a DPS player. And so it's really something that you can do to help out your raid damage a little bit if that's a problem for you. The only other thing I would say on this fight is the Aegis timing. Usually, I think I've only ever seen it when the single boss is up. I don't think I've seen it when the double boss is up. Maybe it's different on Mythic, but just as soon as it spawns, be ready. Jump out, speed boost, move out of it, make sure the boss is coming with you, because she will start casting spells if you don't move fast enough. Provoke from monks does make this a little bit easier, but it's not actually necessary. So you can do this if you just immediately move out of the bubble and make sure the boss is going with you, and she will get out of it before casting if you've gone fast enough. Do note also that the bubbles do tend to come back to back. So you get one bubble, and then maybe less than 10 to 15 seconds later, you'll get the second bubble. So just be prepared to move quickly when that first bubble comes up, because you're going to get another one fairly soon. Remnant of Ner'zhul. I'm going to delete all these real quick. This is yet another 1-stack taunt fight, but this one is actually a little bit more interesting. So, do we have orbs here? We don't. Okay, I'll use like a lock. Well, we got a smiley face over here. We'll use smiley faces for the orbs. So we've got the boss here. So the boss shoots a line targeted at the current tank, and it will hit anything between the boss and the end of the platform. And what you need to do is you need to shoot these orbs, kind of make them vulnerable, right? So you don't need to be right next to the orb, right? Like you could be all the way over here for whatever reason. I say you're this far away, whatever it is. But you could be this far away. As long as you line it up, this orb will get hit. I don't recommend doing that, obviously. What I do recommend, so wherever your stack point is for dropping the dispels for this fight, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to put it like there. Let's say there's your 1 stack point. If you're ping-ponging, there's another stack point. If you're not ping-ponging, you just drop them all there. It doesn't matter what your strategy is, again. But what I would say is don't bait your raid team with the boss positioning. Whether you're doing whatever strat, it doesn't matter. Even if you're able to live a certain knockback from a position, it's not about you, right? You need to keep the boss in a spot where classes or specs that can't live a knockback can still hit the boss and be safe, because again, you're trying to maximize your raid's boss uptime. And so for something like that, if your ping pong spot, say, or you're doing it from triangle, right, you're over here because, hey, look, I'm a demon hunter tank and there's an orb over here and I want to hit this orb, right? Well, what about half your DPS, which can't deal with this because the knockback just went out, right? So what you can do is move the boss over here because you know there's a knockback coming out. The knockback goes out, you get knocked over here, right? And then whether you're ping-ponging, you can keep the boss here, or if you're not ping-ponging, you can then speed boost or whatever, run all the way back here for the next dispel, right? So you need to think about your entire raid, not just, hey, can I live this knockback? Hey, can the red paladin from this position live this knockback, right? So it really depends on your raid comp, and also your focus here, again, making your DPS that can't survive those knockbacks have high uptime by putting them in safe positions. The other thing here, I would say, is don't be lazy with these beams. There's oftentimes on heroic anyways where there's double hits, right? So you have these two, and I see a lot of tanks, they just do this, right? They're like, ah, this one's right here, I'll get this one. Move the boss a little bit. Don't be afraid to move this boss a little bit, especially if there's no knock. Again, the knockbacks are important. You need to be careful of the knockbacks. There is a timing where the knockbacks or the debuff goes out, and then the tank debuff comes shortly after when there's a double. And I would just say communicate, right? Call for not to dispel because you have 20 seconds to dispel. Move the boss a little bit. Get this double, right? This is pretty easy to line up this double. And then you just move back to the spot and then you can start dispelling, right? Because you have 20 seconds to get those dispels. Plenty of time, so just communicate. Make sure you're getting this double hits when they're available to you, and it'll make your healers way happier. And again, when you can, drag boss next to vulnerable orbs to get cleave damage, right? So boss movement, very important on this fight in particular. Don't bait your raid, get doubles when you can, communicate, cleave when you can, and that's what this fight is all about. Moving on, we've got Soulrender Dormazain. You guessed it, it is another one stack taunt fight. Tank mechanic here, very simple. Again, this is another fight where it's more about boss positioning and less so about dealing with the actual tank thing. You want to be closer to Garrosh when tormented eruptions are going out. The red beams through these platforms makes it a lot easier to dodge because you have more time. However, when the adds are spawning, you want to be closer to this way, right? Because you want to be able to move to wherever the cluster of adds are and then either grip in or knock in the other adds so that you can cleave them all down together. Where you stand here, again, does depend on your group comp. If you have DKs, you can just kind of go to the middle-ish of the room, grip in the far ones, and just do your cleave here. If you're lacking DKs, you might want to go to like the biggest cluster, right? Because the adds here are a little bit random, right? Because sometimes you can get like a cluster of 3 adds like over here, and then you just have 1 add way over here, right? So it really just depends on the individual add spawns and your group comp of where you're going to end up going, right? Because if you're like a no DK comp, and this is like your spawn, so you would clearly go over here and you would either just hard CC this guy and go deal with him after, or you would just try and chain knock him back over, right? If you get something more like this, which is another common spawn, it's the same kind of thing, right? You would kind of go to this group of 2, get them cleave down, move across to this group of 2, get them cleave down, that kind of thing. So it really just depends on your spawning. The tank movement on this fight is very dynamic. You need to see what's going on, and again, maximizing cleave damage is something that I'm going to say a lot. But that's kind of the tank's job, right? You're trying to make sure your raid is getting as high DPS as possible, as high damage as possible, is able to cleave onto the boss when they're focusing on priority targets or whatever it is. And so positioning of the boss when there's adds and other things like that is very important. So just try and focus on that for this fight, because again, it's just a one stack taunt fight. There's not much else going on for you, so 100% focus on the boss positioning here. From there, Painsmith Raznal. So this fight is very fun. People have been having fun on this fight this week. Lots of wipes going on. It's an artificer-like tank mechanic. Let me get him down here. So it does fall off damage. You're taunting at 1 again, yes. And then do a spike pattern depending on what phase you're in. And the raid damage is based on distance again. I think maybe I just mentioned that. So you want to try and drop this off in a corner. Again, this will depend on your strategy, so whatever corner your group is choosing, whatever that is, doesn't really matter. On normal, it's less important because there's no traps, so you just want to get as far from the raid as possible. So right, any corner that's far from the raid is fine. On heroic, you do have traps going out, and basically what I would suggest is having one corner area kind of designated for traps. Let's say that's triangle for this. And one corner area that's designated for the tank debuff, so let's say square. Now there are times where you may not exactly be able to get it on square depending on overlap timings, right? Because if the balls, if they're all coming from this side, for example, they'll come through like the very first set of balls. It may make it difficult to get exactly on square, but I believe you can get to like here. Right? You can get 1 over from square, which is perfectly fine because the majority of your raid should be clustered in this area. Right? You should be leaving this area here, these few 3 here, these 3, 4 here, clear. And that's just so people aren't getting cleaved by this tank debuff. Because on Heroic, again, I would highly recommend kind of choosing a corner and trying to get there pretty much every time, just to reduce raid damage and to make it so you don't accidentally trigger traps, because that's one of the major ways that you're going to wipe on this boss. There are some tank specs and even covenants that'll make this easier, of course. Night Fae and Venthyr both have the blink and the port. That'll help you get over things like the spiked ball wall to make this easier. Demon Hunters can jump around, I believe, as long as you're not off the platform when thing detonates. Brewmaster's Transcendence, those kind of things can make it easier for you to always hit this square. So it really just depends on what your tank comp is and whether you're the first or second tank getting the debuff. Because again, the first tank getting the debuff never has the overlap with the balls. That's always the second tank that gets the debuff that has the ball overlap. So choose which tank you're getting to have that overlap wisely. They're going to have to deal with those balls. They'll occasionally not quite be able to make it to the far corner. But usually if you're keeping this area of the platform clear, it's not too much of a problem if one row is over an extra little bit. Be careful with positioning, and again, this is also going to depend on what your raid specific strategy is for this boss fight, whatever that is, but my recommendation is try and pick one corner for traps and the general raid positioning, and one corner to drop the tank debuff to just reduce your overall damage. Tanks may also be the ones eating the traps. Again, depends on your raid strategy. It can be literally anyone, but if it's you, again, just know you never want to take 2 stacks of the trap debuff. You always want to eat one, wait for it to expire, eat another, etc., etc., if you're the ones doing that. Then we've got Guardian of the First Ones. Okay, leading all these things again. Okay, so we got Guardian here. We got the 3 pylons. What, they're like there, there, and there. I think that's the entrance. So this one, the tank debuff on normal, it's pretty easy. You just taunt on Sunder, 1 stack. On Heroic, he does a combo. So he'll go Sunder, Obliterate, Obliterate, Sunder as the tank combo. And you basically just want to taunt off during the first Obliterate so that you get the second Obliterate. And the first tank will eat first Sunder, first Obliterate. Second tank will eat second Obliterate, second Sunder. Now for these tank debuffs, they're a bit interesting. So Sunder, you want to be on your own because it will cleave onto other people. But Obliterate, you want to be with half the raid-ish because that will split damage between all the people that get hit. And then, so you're doing this little bit of a dance, right? So you're alone for Sunder, coming in for Obliterate. The next tank is on a different half of the raid for Obliterate, and then away for the Sunder. It is possible to actually solo soak that Obliterate if that's something you're doing. You'll definitely need a big defensive for this, maybe like Bubble Taunt or Spell Warding Taunt for Paladins, something like Celestial Brew combined with Zen Meditation, something like Blood Spattered Scale or Life Cocoon combined with like any big DR. You can solo soak. It is possible to solo soak that Obliteration, but it can save you a ton of raid damage if your raid is struggling to deal with that at any certain point. So normally most specs aren't able to do this every single time, but they can do it at least 1, maybe 2 times over the course of the fight. So that can really help your healers, and you may need to strategically plan when you're going to solo soak depending on when they're struggling the most. In terms of purging protocols, again, the number is going to be up to your raid, whatever your strategy is, but I would recommend moving the boss under the pylon near the end of the cast. So if you're only going to soak 2 purging protocols, you let the first one go off fully, you let the second one go off fully, and then the third one starts getting near the end of its cast, and then you move him under the pylon, right? This can gain you a few seconds for every single pylon, which could actually be the difference between your first kill and a wipe. Right, so just it buys you just extra DPS time, so you might as well do it. It's just a good thing to get in the habit of doing. It'll definitely be important for Mythic, because that's probably going to be a bit of a tighter DPS check, and it's just a little trick you can do to just help increase your raid's damage onto this boss overall. From there, we've got Fatescribe Roh-Kalo. Let's delete all these guys. There he is. Another Artificer debuff. Take 2. This time it'll spawn an ad that fixates you that you'll just need to kite until your raid kills it. So you just run that out. You blow up. The ad spawns. Let's say it's this. I don't think it's actually that. And then you run back to the boss here. Call for someone to slow it because I think I'm a little smaller. He does run fairly fast. When he's slowed, it's very, very easy for you to deal with, especially if you're able to like circle kite around this boss here. That's kind of just moving in a circle around the boss to kind of keep this ad rotating around the boss himself so that it can be easily cleaved. Very common Mythic Plus skill if you're used to doing that in dungeons, kiting in a circle to kind of keep mobs grouped inside of ground effects like Earthquake, like Flame Patch, that kind of thing. So you're doing just that exact same thing here until that mob is dead. People get some big cleave, spawn into little ads, just kind of pick those up and try and group the boss up on them. And that's really for the tank ad. Note though, this boss is a little bit different in terms of tank damage, so the damage here is actually a bit front loaded. So when you taunt the boss, he's going to gain a few stacks of Diviner's Probe, and he'll just chain cast a medium sized kind of shadow damage hit on the new taunted tank, so you want to make sure you have a defensive for that. And then from there though, like when he doesn't have Diviner's Probe up, his tank damage is not very high, so you just need to be ready for that front loaded spike of damage when you initially taunt. And that's about all the danger you're going to be in as a tank. In terms of boss movement, make sure you're moving him to a safe spot for Fated Conjunction. The safe space is always right next to another beam. So let's do some very, very bad drawing here. What is it? I believe it's like one of the patterns is like this, and like this. That's terrible, but you get the gist. It's like this triangle type pattern, right? And so the safe spot is always like right next to one of the beams that you see. So if I could hit the boss, there we go. Make a new tank because I can't move that tank. It's like you want to be like right there, right next to this beam, because when this actually detonates, it goes off, right? This is going to be going through like right here, right? So like not too much of a safe space. The safe space is always going to be next to one of these active beams that you see, so you always want to drag the boss kind of like that closest area right next to the beam, because especially this pattern in particular, this pattern you have not very much space at all. So be sure to just get right next to one of the beams to make sure everyone in your raid is safe, and in general you just want to kind of tight stack for this ability, so your entire raid is not cleaved by any of these Fated Conjunctions. On heroic difficulty, and I'm going to delete all these. You'll want to make sure you're probably slowly moving the boss around the room as well for the Call of Eternities. That's a big circle that goes around a few players, right? Wherever they drop it off, I'd say they drop it off here. The next Call of Eternity, wherever they drop it off, it's going to echo. So what you can do, like let's use the DPS, let's use the smiley face again. There we go. So they drop one off there. Let's say 3. You had 3 go out. So you had the boss where he is now. 3 of these Fated Conjunctions went out. They dropped them off here. Move the boss just a little bit to like here. Slowly dragging him so that people still have good uptime, whatever. The ranged DPS move with you. And then the next Fated Conjunction, they can just go up here. Maybe like back here. And maybe like up here kind of thing, right? And that gives them more space because these again echo on heroic. So you lose all this space on the next Call of Eternity. So you need to make sure that you're moving enough so that you have space, and then the same thing, just move down, because now those are going to be echoing the next time, etc., etc. And overall, just making sure that your raid has enough space, but also keeping in mind you do need to move for those Fated Conjunctions. So just make sure you're still moving to a good spot for those, and just in general, just try not to do erratic boss movement, slow boss movement, call it out, like, hey, I'm slowly moving here, come with me, be ready to move slightly. Fated Conjunctions, obviously, like call where you're going, that kind of thing, just to make it easier on the rest of your raid so they know everything that's going on. Moving up on the second lost boss now, Kel'Thuzad. Let's delete all these smiley faces. There he is, Kel'Thuzad. Okay, so, yet again, 1-stack taunt boss. This one, again, a little interesting, at least. So it'll split your soul into 3 pieces. It'll spawn ads. I don't know. Let's say it's the mage Kel'Thuzad, just around the edge of the room, and basically you have 1 minute to kill these guys and pick up the little puddle they leave on the ground. Otherwise, you die. Assuming you do that, then your tank debuff, which is like a 500% physical damage taken increase, very, very large, then that will disappear once you've collected all 3 pieces of your soul. Similar to Ner'zhul, do not be afraid to move this boss to get cleave. Right? If you're doing short movements like this, you get some extra cleave on this ad, it dies real quick. Meanwhile, Ranger dealing with these ads out here. Maybe the other tank is helping. Right, you've got a tank there. And it's just extra damage, extra cleave onto the boss. Always a good thing. So if you can ever do this, it's great to do. Also, sometimes the Frost Pillars, depends again on your strategy with the Frost Pillars. Oftentimes you're going to see them like stacked up, at least 2 or 3 stacked up, let's say like right there. Just if it's a little further away, and these are ones that you're planning on killing, not leaving alive or whatever it is, you can drag boss over there, kill them, right? Just extra cleave damage is always good to have. For the blizzard phase, in the first phase, just you got to find the safe spot, right? There's going to be puddles like all over the place, and just you got to look around and find the safe spot for your raid to stand. Right, so in this situation, right, you got puddles all over the place. The safe spot is like over here-ish, where there's going to be a very small safe spot, like right in this little area right there. You got to try and look for that when the puddles start coming out. Make sure you move early enough that you're not getting any DPS killed by walking through a puddle or anything like that. For the intermission, let's delete all these. You've got 2 abominations that'll spawn, so you can just have a tank pick up each of them. 2 of these boys, and you got 2 of these guys. Same thing here, cleave. Cleave is good. You want to pick up these A-bombs, and you want to drag them over and tank them on top of whichever, I don't remember what these are, these Banshee ads are, because they are going to be the high priority ads, and so they're going to be the ones DPS are focusing out here, and so any incidental cleave damage you can get is very good. This one dies, you then move over here, so people can start focusing this one and cleaving onto the A-bombs there. This one dies. It really depends on where your DPS is at this point. We've had Kel'Thuzad pushing while we have both A-bombs alive still. And basically what we do here is that, let's say this tank is tanking Kel'Thuzad and this A-bomb. When Kel'Thuzad becomes active, we have this tank taunt this A-bomb, so they have both A-bombs. Because again, the physical damage taken increase is 500% when you get the tank debuff. So if you get this tank debuff and this A-bomb is still alive and hitting you, you're dead. You're done. That's it for you. So you got to make sure if you have these A-bombs alive when Kel'Thuzad becomes back active, whichever tank is taking Kel'Thuzad is only tanking Kel'Thuzad, and the other tank grabs the other A-bomb, just to make sure the tanks are in a safe spot. Phase 3 is a lot like Phase 1 with the ice area, so you just need to find the safe spot in the ice, drag them over. Whenever the A-bomb spawn, just make sure someone picks it up. He wasn't doing the tank buster in this phase, so you're fine. But yeah, you're just picking up this A-bomb. I don't believe you should ever focus it. I'm pretty sure all your damage is better spent on Kel'Thuzad. I think you're just kind of tanking him and making sure he doesn't smack any DPS or healer players. But yeah, this phase is just a big burn fight, so find the safe spot in the ice, get over there quickly so everyone is safe, and just nuke down Kel'Thuzad. And then that brings us to our final boss, Sylvanas Windrunner. Okay, this is it's a bit of a weird one for tanks. So, not sure if this is a bug or intended or whatever it is, or if it's fixed by now or not, whatever. But we found when we were doing this boss that Wailing Arrow doesn't always target the active tank. Sometimes it targets the inactive tank, so just be aware when you're a tank on this fight, is that you could get that Wailing Arrow at any moment. So don't, even if you're not tanking, be aware, don't drop the Wailing Arrow in the middle of the raid. If you get targeted by that arrow, just make sure you get out. It's another Artificer type thing, so it'll deal fall off damage based on distance, so just get that way out of the raid, and then you can come back after the fact. For the Ranger's Heartseeker, which is that tank debuff, make sure you have some sort of mitigation up for this. It's going to be 3 hits that are like 2/3 physical, 1/3 shadow damage. So it's a little bit scary. On normal, you can probably get away with doing very little mitigation. On heroic, it's very scary, so get in the habit of using mitigation for that. But also note, something like Windrunner takes priority over the Ranger's Heartseeker. So if Windrunner is coming up, it can actually delay the Ranger's Heartseeker by a ton. So I would definitely watch the Windrunner buff on Sylvanas herself to see how much time you kind of have before she's going to start restacking up Ranger's Heartseeker. And so at that point, you're in a pretty safe spot. She's not doing a ton of tank damage during Windrunner. And so just prepare your defensives accordingly. On the topic of Windrunner, it is a bit disorienting when you're first seeing it, but just keep an eye on the buff. Again, it has a timer on Sylvanas, and while it's up, the boss is exactly where she was before. You're fine, you can hit her right there. Once the buff is gone, if she jumps away, she jumped away, so make sure you get over to her. Just, again, really keeping a close eye on that Windrunner buff on the boss. Phase 2, where is it, this one? Yeah, Phase 2, there's really not much to talk about here for tanks. Group the ads, kill them, run across the bridge, interrupt Sylvanas, that kind of, you know, it's pretty sleeper for tank. I mean, it's pretty sleeper for literally everyone. There's nothing really I'm going to mention about this phase. Final phase, though, you've got this platform. I would recommend tanking on the inner part of the platform. I think it's this, right? Yeah, let's assume that the middle is like this way, and like this is the platform, and so you've got your next platform going triangle and square. These are where the other platforms are. So I would say when you're dropping puddles like around there, as a tank, your job here is likely going to be the puddle vacuum. So whatever tank is not currently actively on the boss, you'll go to the next platform, soak up all the puddles, come back, come down here, and get dispelled to drop all the puddles down here so that your next platform is clear of puddles. You can pretty safely get to like 10 plus stacks of these puddles. Like even it's just a small shadow dot. So as long as you're prepared for it, you can go 15 plus. As many, you just grab all the puddles really. You just need to be careful on heroic. There's I think it's called Banshee's Fury. So it'll explode, dealing damage based on the number of stacks you have. So just make sure you don't have stacks, or a ton of stacks at least, for when that goes out. So just kind of time your soaking and getting over here and getting dispelled so that you don't get blown up by that. Aside from that, it's pretty much the same as phase 1. But there we go. All 10 bosses on normal and heroic in the Sanctum of Domination from a tank's perspective. As always, if you guys have any questions regarding this, you can leave a comment down below, or you can come over to my Twitch channel at Tactics and ask me there, and I will do my best to answer. Remember though, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really does help. I'll be posting a lot of videos on tank stuff, whether that be Mythic Plus, Mythic rating, normal heroic rating like this, lots of walkthroughs, lots of commentary videos. So be sure to subscribe to the channel if that's stuff that you're interested in. That is it for this video though. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.